My name is Marcus Sullivan. I am 20 years old, and 3 months ago I sent my parents to prison. Not because I wanted to, not because I am some vindictive kid who turned on his family, but because they were slowly killing my grandfather, and I was the only one who noticed. Or maybe I was the only one who cared enough to do something about it. This story starts on Thanksgiving, which feels appropriate in the worst possible way. You know, the holiday where families are supposed to come together and be grateful and pretend everything is perfect. Except nothing in my family was perfect, and it took a napkin with 3 shaky words on it to make me see the truth. I should probably start earlier, though. Give you some context. My grandfather, Robert Sullivan, raised me, not officially, not in the legal sense, but in every way that mattered. My parents both worked constantly when I was growing up. Mom was a real estate agent who was always showing houses or at open houses on weekends. Dad was a corporate accountant who traveled for work more often than he was home. So, from the time I was about 5 until I was maybe 14 or 15, I spent most of my time with Grandpa. He lived in a small house about 10 minutes from ours, and after school the bus would drop me off at his place instead of mine. We would do homework together at his kitchen table. He would make me snacks, these elaborate after-school creations that were way better than anything my parents ever made. Peanut butter and banana sandwiches with honey drizzled on top, grilled cheese with tomato soup on cold days, homemade chocolate chip cookies that were still warm when I bit into them. We would watch game shows and sports, Jeopardy every night at 7, baseball games on weekends. He would quiz me during Jeopardy, and I would try to beat him to the answers, which almost never happened, because Grandpa knew everything. On weekends when my parents were working, which was most weekends, I would stay over at his house. We would work in his garden, a huge vegetable garden in his backyard where he grew tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and squash. He taught me how to tell when the vegetables were ripe, how to prune the plants, how to keep the pests away without using chemicals. He taught me how to fix things, how to use tools, how to diagnose what was wrong with a broken appliance or a leaky faucet. He taught me how to cook basic meals, not just snacks, but real food. Spaghetti and meatballs, pot roast, chicken and rice. He would stand next to me at the stove, guiding my hands, teaching me to taste as I cooked, to adjust seasonings, to know when something was done. He taught me how to throw a baseball, spending hours in his backyard with me, patiently showing me how to grip the ball, how to follow through, how to aim. He taught me how to change a tire, how to check the oil in a car, how to jumpstart a dead battery. He taught me how to tie different kinds of knots, demonstrating each one slowly until I could do it myself. He taught me how to play chess, and we would spend entire Sunday afternoons locked in slow, strategic battles across his old wooden chessboard. But more than any of those specific skills, he taught me how to be a good person. He taught me to keep my word, to be honest even when it was hard, to stand up for people who could not stand up for themselves. He taught me that being a man was not about being tough or strong or hiding your feelings. It was about being kind, being responsible, being there for the people you loved. He was more of a father to me than my actual father ever was. My dad was a distant figure in my childhood, always working, always stressed, always too busy to throw a ball, or help with homework, or just sit and talk. My mom was warmer, more present, but she was also always rushing, always juggling a dozen things at once, always distracted by the next showing or the next client call. They provided for me, sure. I had a roof over my head and food to eat and clothes to wear, but Grandpa gave me something more important. He gave me his time. He gave me his attention. He gave me his love freely and completely, without conditions or distractions. I loved him more than I loved anyone else in the world, and I took him for granted, the way kids always take adults for granted, assuming he would always be there. When I was 15, everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was at Grandpa's house doing homework. He was in the kitchen making me a snack when I heard a crash. I ran in and found him on the floor, one side of his body not moving, right? His face drooping, his speech slurred and incomprehensible. I called 911, terrified and shaking, and rode with him in the ambulance to the hospital. He had had a stroke, not a massive one, the doctors said, but significant. He survived, but it left him weaker. His left side was affected. His left arm did not work quite right. His left leg dragged a bit when he walked. His speech became a little slurred, especially when he was tired. He needed a walker to get around safely. The doctors said he would need help with daily tasks, at least for a while, maybe permanently. Physical therapy could help, they said, but he would probably never fully recover. I was devastated. I visited him every day in the hospital, then every day in the rehab facility, where he went to learn how to function with his new limitations. I watched him struggle to relearn basic tasks: how to button a shirt with one hand, how to feed himself, how to walk without falling. It broke my heart to see this strong, capable man reduced to depending on nurses for everything. My parents came to visit too, but not as often. They were busy, they said. Work was demanding. They had responsibilities. I remember feeling angry at them for that, for not being there more, but I did not say anything. I was just a kid. What did I know about adult obligations? After 6 weeks, Grandpa was released from rehab. He could walk with a walker. He could mostly take care of himself, though he needed help with some things like bathing and cooking. The doctors recommended he have someone check on him daily, help him with medications, make sure he was eating and staying safe. That is, when my parents decided he should move in with us, they framed it as a generous offer, a loving gesture. They would take care of him, make sure he was safe, help him continue his recovery. At the time, I thought it was the right thing to do. I was happy about it. Actually, it meant I would get to see Grandpa every day again, instead of just after school and on weekends. It meant I could help take care of him, repay him for all those years he took care of me. But looking back now, I realized they had other motives. Motives I was too young and too trusting to see. Grandpa had money, not rich, but comfortable. He owned his house outright, a small 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood that was worth maybe $250,000. He had savings about $100,000 accumulated over a lifetime of careful spending and smart investing. He had a good pension from his 35 years working as an electrical engineer for a major company. He had Social Security. Altogether, he was bringing in about $4,000 a month in retirement income, and he had been living on less than half of that, saving the rest. When he moved in with us, my parents convinced him to sell his house. They said it made sense. He would not be living there anymore. The money from the sale could go toward his care, toward modifications they would need to make to our house to accommodate him, toward medical expenses. Grandpa agreed. He trusted them. He trusted his son. The house sold for $260,000. The money went into an account that my father managed for him. Around the same time, Grandpa signed papers giving my father power of attorney, both medical and financial. Again, it seemed reasonable. Grandpa had just had a stroke. His handwriting was shaky. He had trouble understanding complex documents. He needed someone to help him manage his affairs. And my father was an accountant, a professional who dealt with money and legal documents every day. Of course, he could be trusted, except he could not. For the first year or so after Grandpa moved in, things seemed okay. He had the guest room on the first floor, which was good because he could not really do stairs anymore. The room had its own bathroom, so he did not have to go far. My parents had a ramp installed at the front door so he could get in and out with his walker. They bought him a special bed that could raise and lower, supposedly to make it easier for him to get up. I would hang out with him after school like always. We would watch TV together in his room or in the living room. He would help me with my homework as much as he could, though the stroke had made some things harder for him. He was going to physical therapy 3 times a week, and he was getting better. His speech improved. He got stronger. His left arm was still weak, but he was learning to compensate. He graduated from a walker to a cane. The therapist said he was making excellent progress. Then I turned 16 and got my driver's license and got my first real job and started spending more time with friends and less time at home. Suddenly, I was not around as much. I would come home late from work or go straight to a friend's house after school. I was at that age where I was pulling away from my family, trying to establish my independence, more interested in my own life than in anyone else's. And I feel guilty about that now. So guilty, because those were the years when things started to change, and I was too busy, too distracted, too self-absorbed to notice. By the time I graduated high school and started community college, Grandpa had declined. Or at least, that is what my parents told me. I did not see it happening because I was barely home. I was taking classes during the day and working at a restaurant at night, and trying to maintain some kind of social life in between. I would come home late and go straight to my room. I would see Grandpa maybe once or twice a week, always briefly, usually when I was rushing out the door to something else. My parents said his dementia was getting worse. They said he was confused all the time, asking the same questions over and over, not recognizing where he was. They said he would wander around the house at night, disoriented and upset, and they were worried he would hurt himself. They said he had become incontinent and needed to wear adult diapers. They said he was becoming aggressive sometimes, lashing out when they tried to help him. They said he needed more care than they could provide during the day when they were both at work. They hired a home health aide who came during the day, a woman named Rosa who spoke limited English but seemed nice the few times I saw her. My parents said she was trained in elder care, that she helped Grandpa with bathing and dressing and meals. They installed a lock on Grandpa's bedroom door. When I asked about it, they said it was for his safety, to keep him from wandering at night. They said the doctor had recommended it. They said it was a temporary measure until his condition stabilized. They said it was necessary, and I believed them, because why would not I? They were my parents. They had taken Grandpa in when he needed help. They were paying for his care. They had no reason to lie, and I was too busy with my own life to question it. Too wrapped up in school and work and friends to dig deeper. Too willing to accept the easy explanation because actually investigating would have required time and effort I did not want to spend. I am ashamed of that now. Ashamed of how easily I believed them. Ashamed of how little attention I paid. Ashamed of how I prioritized my own convenience over my grandfather's well-being. But I did not know. I swear I did not know what they were really doing. I did not know they were draining his accounts. I did not know they were keeping him prisoner. I did not know they were drugging him into compliance. I did not know that the locked door was not for his safety, but for their control. I did not know any of it until Thanksgiving. Until that napkin. Until those 3 shaky words that changed everything. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I had not really spent time with Grandpa in months. I had seen him in passing, sure. Quick hellos when I came home to grab something or do laundry. But we had not talked, not really. Had not watched TV together or played chess or just sat and been together the way we used to. I told myself I was busy. I told myself he probably would not even remember our conversations anyway with his dementia. I told myself a lot of things to justify my absence. I had Thursday and Friday off for Thanksgiving break, and I planned to go home Wednesday night and stay through Sunday. My roommate was going home to his family, and I had nowhere else to be. Plus, my mom had been asking me to come home more often, saying they never saw me, saying Grandpa would love to see me. So I felt obligated to go. I got to my parents' house around 7 on Wednesday night after my last class. Mom was in the living room watching some home improvement show. Dad was in his study working on something on his computer. The house smelled like the vanilla candles my mom was always burning. Everything looked normal, clean, comfortable, like a regular middle-class house, where a regular middle-class family lived. I asked where Grandpa was, and Mom said he was in his room, that he had already eaten dinner and gone to bed. It was only 7. That seemed early, but Mom said he tired easily now, that he often went to bed right after dinner. She said I could see him in the morning. I went upstairs to my old room, which my parents had kept mostly the same. My bed, my desk, my posters on the wall. It felt strange being there, like visiting a museum of my own past. I unpacked my bag, took a shower, and went to bed early myself. I was tired from a long week of classes and work, and I figured I would have plenty of time to see Grandpa over the next few days. Thursday morning, I woke up around 9. I came downstairs to find Mom in the kitchen, already preparing for Thanksgiving dinner. She had the turkey out, vegetables everywhere, pots and pans covering every surface. She was stressed, I could tell. She got like that when she was hosting, obsessing over every detail, snapping at anyone who got in her way. I asked if I could see Grandpa, and she said he was still sleeping, that he had been very tired lately, that it was best to let him rest. I offered to help her cook, and she gave me tasks: chopping vegetables, peeling potatoes, setting the table. We worked in the kitchen for hours, and I kept expecting Grandpa to wake up and come out, but he never did. Around noon, my aunt and uncle arrived. My mom's sister Linda and her husband Greg. They had 2 young kids, my cousin's 6-year-old twins named Emma and Ethan. The kids ran around the house immediately, touching everything, making noise, the way little kids do. Linda and Greg settled in the living room with drinks, and Dad joined them, everyone talking and laughing. At one point, I went to Grandpa's door and knocked softly. No answer. I tried the handle. It was locked. I stood there for a moment, confused. Why was his door locked from the outside? Mom had said the lock was to keep him from wandering out, but that would be a lock on the inside that he could not open, not a lock on the outside that kept other people out. I went back to the kitchen and asked Mom why Grandpa's door was locked. She looked at me sharply. Because he gets confused, she said. He tries to leave his room when he should not. The lock keeps him safe. But he is locked in, I said. How is that safe? Marcus, I do not have time for this right now, she snapped. I have a dozen things to finish before dinner. Your grandfather is fine. He is resting. We will bring him out for dinner. Now can you please go stir the gravy before it burns? I stirred the gravy, but I could not shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Something about the locked door bothered me. Something about the way Mom had reacted when I questioned it. But I told myself I was being paranoid. My parents were taking care of Grandpa. They had been doing it for 5 years. They knew what they were doing. Dinner was at 4. The table was set with my mom's fancy china, the stuff she only brought out for holidays. The food looked amazing. Turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes and gravy and green bean casserole and cranberry sauce and rolls, and at least 3 different pies for dessert. My aunt had brought wine, and the adults were all drinking, getting louder and more relaxed as dinner approached. At 3:45, Dad said he was going to get Grandpa. I offered to go with him, and he said no, that it was better if he did it alone, that Grandpa got confused with too many people. So I waited in the dining room with everyone else while Dad went to unlock the door and bring Grandpa out. When they came back, I barely recognized my grandfather. I had not really looked at him, not closely, in months, and the change was shocking. He had lost weight, a lot of weight. His face looked hollow, his cheekbones prominent, his eyes sunken. His hair, which had always been silver but full, was thin and patchy, like someone who was sick. He shuffled forward with his walker, moving slowly, each step an effort. His eyes looked vacant, unfocused, like he was not really seeing what was in front of him. He was wearing pajamas, old, stained pajamas that looked like they had not been washed in a while. At 4 in the afternoon, for Thanksgiving dinner, while everyone else was dressed nicely, Dad guided him to the end of the table and helped him sit down next to me. Grandpa just stared at his empty plate, not looking up, not acknowledging anyone. The twins were making noise, and Grandpa did not even react. It was like he was not fully present. "Hi, Grandpa," I said, leaning close to him. "How are you doing?" He turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were cloudy, confused. "Marcus?" he said, my name coming out slow and slurred. "Yeah, Grandpa, it is me," I said, trying to smile. "Happy Thanksgiving." He nodded and patted my hand, but his eyes were still confused. My mother started bringing out the food, and we all began loading our plates. I helped Grandpa, cutting his turkey into small pieces, mashing his potatoes so they would be easier for him to eat. He had trouble holding his fork, his hand shaking badly. Everyone else was talking and laughing. Linda was telling some story about the twins' school. Greg was arguing with Dad about politics. The twins were being loud, fighting over a role. It was chaos, the normal chaos of a family holiday. And in the middle of it all, Grandpa sat there silently, eating mechanically, a ghost at his own family's table. I kept watching him. There was something wrong beyond the obvious physical decline, something in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear. But every time I tried to catch his eye, to really look at him, Mom would say something to me or pass me a dish, and the moment would be lost. About halfway through dinner, I felt something touch my leg under the table. I looked down and saw Grandpa's hand, shaking badly, holding a white cloth napkin. He was pressing it against my leg, insistent, his fingers gripping the fabric, so hard his knuckles were white. I took it, confused, and he immediately pulled his hand back and put it in his lap. He did not look at me, just went back to staring at his plate. I unfolded the napkin under the table, where no one else could see, careful to keep it below the edge of the tablecloth. On it, written in shaky handwriting that was barely legible, were 3 words: "Help me, Marcus." My heart stopped. I read it again, making sure I was seeing it correctly. "Help me, Marcus." The letters were uneven, some almost illegible, but the message was clear. I looked at Grandpa, and for just a second, maybe 2 seconds, his eyes were completely clear, sharp, focused, desperate. He was looking right at me, and I could see terror in his expression. Real, genuine terror, the look of someone who was trapped and knew it. Then my mother said something to him, asking if he wanted more potatoes, and his face went vacant again, like a light had been switched off. But I had seen it, that moment of lucidity, that plea for help. I folded the napkin quickly and shoved it in my pocket, my hands shaking. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. I looked around the table, but no one else seemed to have noticed anything. They were all eating and talking and laughing. Dad was refilling wine glasses. Linda was wiping cranberry sauce off Ethan's face. Greg was helping himself to more turkey, and Grandpa was sitting there, trapped, having just begged his grandson for help, and no one knew. No one except me. I could not eat anymore. My stomach was churning. I took a sip of water and tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. What did the note mean? Help with what? Was he being hurt? Was he sick and not getting proper care? Was he trying to tell me something my parents were hiding? I kept glancing at him, but he would not look at me again. He just stared at his plate, occasionally taking a small bite of food when my mother prompted him. "Robert, eat your vegetables," she would say in this bright, fake voice. "Robert, drink your water," treating him like a child, and he would obey mechanically, without any sign that he understood or cared. After what felt like an eternity, dinner was over. Everyone was full and happy, complimenting my mom on the meal. The twins ran off to play with some toys Linda had brought. The adults settled in the living room with coffee and pie, and Dad took Grandpa back to his room. I watched them go, watched my father's hand on Grandpa's shoulder, guiding him down the hallway. Grandpa shuffled along with his walker, his head down, defeated. The door closed behind them, and I heard the lock click. That sound made my skin crawl. I waited a few minutes, then said I needed to use the bathroom. I went down the hallway toward Grandpa's room instead. The door was closed. I tried the handle gently. Locked. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. I could hear nothing. No TV. No movement. Just silence. I knocked softly. "Grandpa, it is Marcus. Are you okay?" No answer. I waited, straining to hear anything. Then, very faintly, I heard what might have been a voice. Or maybe it was my imagination. I could not tell. I went back to the dining room and spent the rest of the evening on autopilot, eating pie I did not taste, laughing at jokes I did not hear, playing with the twins when Linda asked me to entertain them, all while that napkin burned in my pocket and questions burned in my mind. What did Grandpa need help with? Why had his eyes looked so terrified? Why was he locked in his room? Why did he look so sick and thin? Why was he wearing dirty pajamas to Thanksgiving dinner? Nothing made sense, and every explanation I tried to give myself fell apart under scrutiny. Around 8, Linda and Greg left with the twins. They said their goodbyes, hugging everyone, saying it had been a wonderful Thanksgiving. Mom looked pleased, like the dinner had been a success. Dad poured himself another glass of wine and settled in to watch football. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Except it was not. I said I was tired and went upstairs to my room, but I did not sleep. I lay in my bed, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that napkin, about Grandpa's eyes, about the locked door, about how much weight he had lost, about how confused he seemed, about how my parents treated him like a child. Around midnight, I got up and pulled the napkin out of my pocket. I turned on my desk lamp and looked at it again. "Help me, Marcus." The handwriting was shaky but determined, someone who was struggling but trying hard to communicate. This was not the writing of someone so far gone, with dementia, that they did not know what they were doing. This was deliberate, purposeful. I opened my laptop and started searching. Elder abuse signs. Dementia medication side effects. How to know if elderly parent is being mistreated. Article after article popped up, and with each one I read, I felt sicker and sicker. Signs of elder abuse. Unexplained weight loss, poor hygiene, signs of being confined or restrained, withdrawal or fearfulness, changes in personality, unusual bank account activity, caregiver refuses to allow visits, medication that could cause confusion in elderly patients, sedatives, anti-anxiety medications, sleeping pills, antipsychotics, all of which could make a person seem more confused than they really were, all of which could be used to keep someone compliant and quiet. Financial exploitation of the elderly. Adult children who take control of an elderly parent's finances, who isolate the parent from friends and family, who spend the parent's money on themselves while claiming it is for care. I read story after story from people who discovered too late that their elderly relatives were being abused. People who ignored the signs because they trusted the caregivers. People who believed explanations that seemed reasonable on the surface, but were actually cover-ups for something terrible. People who felt guilty for the rest of their lives for not acting sooner. By the time the sun came up on Friday morning, I had not slept at all, but I had made a decision. I was going to figure out what was really happening to Grandpa, and if my parents were hurting him, I was going to stop them, no matter what it cost me. I came downstairs around 8. My parents were both in the kitchen, drinking coffee, and reading the newspaper like it was a normal day. They looked well-rested and relaxed. The picture of a comfortable middle-class couple the morning after a successful holiday. "Good morning," Mom said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Yeah," I lied. "Is Grandpa up yet?" Her smile faltered slightly. "No, he is still sleeping. He was very tired after yesterday." "Can I see him when he wakes up?" "He usually does not wake up until late morning," she said. "Sometimes not until noon. The medication makes him drowsy." "What medication?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "His dementia medication," she said, "and some anti-anxiety medication. He gets very agitated sometimes, especially in the evenings." "What are the medications called?" She looked at me sharply. "Why are you asking so many questions?" "I am just curious," I said. "I mean, he is my grandfather. I care about him. I want to know what is going on with him." "He is being well cared for," Dad said from behind his newspaper. "Your mother and I have been handling his care for 5 years. We know what we are doing." "I am not saying you do not," I said. "I am just interested. Can I see the medication bottles?" "Marcus," Mom said, and her voice had an edge now, "why this sudden interest in your grandfather's care? You have barely been home in 2 years. You have barely asked about him. And now, suddenly you are acting like you are some kind of expert." The accusation stung because it was true. I had not been home much. I had not paid attention. I had been too busy with my own life. "You are right," I said. "I should have been here more. So let me make up for it now. Let me spend some time with him this weekend. I can sit with him, keep him company, give you guys a break." My parents exchanged a look, one of those married couple looks where whole conversations happen without words. Then Dad said, "He is not really up for visitors right now, son. He gets confused easily. Too much stimulation is not good for him." "I am not a visitor," I said. "I am his grandson, the grandson he raised." "You know what I mean," Dad said, his voice getting harder. "Look, we appreciate that you care, but we have a routine with Robert, and it works. It is better not to disrupt it." "What routine?" I asked. "What does his day look like?" "Marcus, that is enough," Mom said firmly. "I do not know what has gotten into you, but you need to drop this. Your grandfather is being well cared for. He has everything he needs. And frankly, your sudden concern feels a little insulting considering how absent you have been." I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to pull out that napkin and show them what Grandpa had written. But something stopped me. Some instinct that told me if I pushed too hard, if I showed my hand too soon, they would just shut me out completely. So I backed off. "Okay, I am sorry. You are right. I have not been here, and I do not have any right to suddenly act like I know better than you." They both relaxed visibly. "We are glad you understand," Dad said. "Now, what are your plans for today?" We made small talk for a while. I helped Mom clean up from yesterday's dinner. I watched TV with Dad, and all the while I was waiting, planning, thinking about what to do next. Around noon, Dad said he needed to run to his office to pick up some files. Mom decided to go with him, said she wanted to stop at the store to return something. They would be gone for about an hour, maybe a little more. "Will you be okay here alone?" Mom asked, and I almost laughed at the irony. She was worried about leaving me alone in the house when they were the ones keeping my grandfather locked in a room. "I will be fine," I said. "I will just watch TV or something." The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I went to Grandpa's room. The door was still locked. I jiggled the handle, trying to see if there was any way to open it from the outside without a key, but it was a real deadbolt, the kind that needed a key to open from either side. I went to my parents' bedroom. I felt like a criminal going through their things, but I told myself this was necessary. I started with the obvious places, the nightstand drawers. Nothing but the usual stuff. Old glasses, chargers, books, medications for my parents themselves. I checked the dresser drawers. Just clothes. I checked the closet. More clothes, shoes, boxes of old photos. Then I checked Dad's desk in the corner of their bedroom. The drawers were locked, which was suspicious in itself. Why would you lock your desk drawers in your own bedroom unless you had something to hide? I looked around for a key, but could not find one. I tried to pry the drawer open, but it was solid wood and would not budge. Finally, I checked the bathroom, and there in the medicine cabinet behind some bottles of vitamins and aspirin, I found a small ring of keys. One of them looked like a desk key. The others looked like they might fit a deadbolt. I went back to Grandpa's room and tried the keys one by one. The first one did not fit. The second one did not turn. The third one slid in and turned, and I heard the lock click open. I pushed the door open slowly. "Grandpa, it is Marcus. Can I come in?" The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. When they did, I had to fight not to gasp. The room was nothing like it had been the last time I had really looked at it, which had been years ago. The nice guest bed was gone, replaced with a hospital bed with rails on the sides. The comfortable chair where Grandpa used to sit and read was gone. The bookshelf that had been full of his favorite books was gone. The room had been stripped of everything personal, everything comfortable, everything that made it a bedroom and not a hospital room. There was a bedside table with bottles of medication lined up on it. Dozens of bottles. More medication than any one person should be taking. There was a bedpan on the floor next to the bed. There was a walker in the corner, and next to it, a wheelchair I had never seen before. The room smelled stale, like it had not been aired out in weeks, like sickness and age and despair. And in the bed, so small and frail that he barely made a shape under the thin blanket, was my grandfather. He was awake. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. When I walked in, he turned his head slowly to look at me. "Marcus," he said, and his voice was hoarse, rough, like he had not used it much recently. "You came." I pulled a chair up next to his bed and sat down. "Of course I came. Grandpa, what is going on? Are you okay?" His eyes filled with tears. "I am not crazy," he said, his voice shaking. "I am not crazy. They say I am, but I am not. I know what is happening. I know what they are doing." "What are they doing?" I asked gently. "They are keeping me prisoner," he said, the words tumbling out now like he had been waiting to say them. "They lock me in here. Every day. Every night. They give me pills that make me fuzzy, make me confused, make me sleep. They do not let me leave this room except for holidays when other people are here, and then they drug me extra so I cannot tell anyone what is really happening." "How long has this been going on?" "A long time," he said. "It started slow. At first it was just a little extra medication to help me sleep. Then it was locking the door at night so I would not wander. Then it was keeping me in here during the day. Then it was taking away my phone so I could not call anyone. Then it was stopping my physical therapy appointments. Then it was getting rid of the aide, or at least I think they did, because Rosa stopped coming. I do not know how long ago. Time is hard to track when you are locked in a room with no clock and curtains that are always closed. My chest felt tight. "The note you gave me yesterday. At dinner. You were clear-headed then. Were you pretending to be confused?" "I have been pretending for 2 weeks," he said. "I stopped taking all the pills. When your mother brings them, I put them under my tongue and spit them out after she leaves. It has been hard. They watch me sometimes. But I have been managing. The less medication in my system, the clearer my head gets. And I realized I needed to be clear for Thanksgiving. I knew you would be here. I knew you were my only chance. Chance for what? To get out of here, he said. To get help. To stop them from stealing everything I have left and killing me slowly. Grandpa, what do you mean stealing? He pointed with a shaking hand to the bedside table. Bottom drawer. I have been keeping documents. They do not know. They think I am too out of it to understand. But I am not. I see everything. I understand everything. And I have been collecting proof. I opened the bottom drawer of the bedside table. Inside were dozens of folded pieces of paper, all stuffed in haphazardly. Bank statements, credit card statements, bills, receipts. I pulled them out and started looking through them. What I saw made my blood run cold. Bank statements for Grandpa's accounts, showing withdrawal after withdrawal. $50,000 here, $20,000 there. Transfers to accounts in my parents' names. Checks written to my parents with Grandpa's signature on them. A signature that looked nothing like his actual handwriting. The accounts that had held over $400,000 5 years ago now held less than $50,000. Credit card statements in Grandpa's name, showing charges he clearly had not made. A new car for $35,000. Furniture for $12,000. Jewelry for $8,000. A vacation package to Italy for $15,000. All charged to Grandpa's credit cards. All paid for with Grandpa's money. All things my parents had enjoyed while Grandpa was locked in this room. Receipts for things that were supposedly for Grandpa's care, but clearly were not. A receipt for a home health aide that showed my parents had stopped paying for the service 8 months ago. A receipt for physical therapy sessions that ended 2 years ago. A receipt for medication that did not match any of the bottles on the bedside table. I took photos of everything with my phone. Every single document, every bank statement, every receipt, every credit card bill. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady, but I made sure every image was clear and readable. Grandpa, I said when I had photographed everything, how long have you been keeping these? As long as I could, he said. They leave papers lying around sometimes. Bills and statements. They think I am too confused to understand what I am looking at. But when they are not watching, when they think I am sleeping or too drugged to notice, I take the papers and hide them. I have been doing it for over a year. Why did not you tell someone sooner? Why did not you call the police or a lawyer or someone? With what phone? He asked bitterly. They took my cell phone 3 years ago. They said I was calling people and getting confused, saying crazy things, so it was better if I did not have access to a phone. There is no phone in this room. The only time I see the outside world is when they bring me out for appearances, like yesterday, and then they drug me so heavily I can barely speak. What about Rosa, the aide? Could not you have told her? Rosa barely spoke English, he said, and your parents were always here when she was here, watching, listening. I tried to tell her once, and your mother overheard and fired her the next day. That was when they stopped hiring anyone to help. They said they would do all my care themselves. And by care, they mean bringing me food once or twice a day, giving me pills to keep me quiet, and otherwise leaving me alone in this room. I felt rage building inside me, hot and sharp and all-consuming. Have they hurt you? Physically, I mean. Not in the way you are thinking, he said. No hitting or anything like that. But neglect is a form of harm, is not it? I have not had a real shower in months. Just washcloth baths that do not really clean anything. I have sores on my back from lying in bed too much. My muscles have wasted away from lack of use. They feed me, but barely. Just enough to keep me alive. Mostly soup and crackers. Sometimes toast. I have lost over 40 pounds. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why are they doing this? Money, he said simply. They need my money. Your father made some bad investments, lost a lot of their savings. They were drowning in debt, so they decided to solve their problem by helping themselves to mine. At first, I think they told themselves they would pay it back, that they were just borrowing. But then they started spending on luxuries. And then they realized that if I died, everything I had left would go to them anyway. So why not just take it now? And why not make sure I die sooner rather than later, so they do not have to deal with me anymore? They are trying to kill you. I felt sick. Not actively, he said. But they are not keeping me alive either. Minimal food. No exercise. No fresh air. No stimulation. Too much medication. They are creating the conditions for me to decline and die. And then they will say it was just his time, he was old and sick, and it was natural. No one will question it. No one except you. I grabbed his hand, his thin, frail hand that used to be so strong. I'm going to get you out of here. I promise. But I need you to trust me and be patient for a little bit longer while I figure out how to do this right. How long? He asked, and there was such fear in his voice. Not long. A day. Maybe 2. I need to go to the police with this. I need to make sure there is enough evidence that they cannot wiggle out of it. And I need to make sure you are protected when I do. What if they find out you know? He asked. What if they realize you have been in here? They will not, I said. I am going to lock the door behind me and put the keys back where I found them. I am going to act normal, and then I am going to make sure they pay for what they have done. Marcus, he said, gripping my hand with what little strength he had left. If this does not work, if they do not believe you, or if your parents find a way to explain it all away, they will increase my medication. They will make sure I cannot tell anyone anything. They will make sure I do not live long enough to testify against them. That is not going to happen, I said firmly. I will not let that happen. Do you trust me? He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. Then he nodded. You are a good boy, Marcus. A good man. Your grandfather is proud of you. I felt tears running down my face. I love you, Grandpa. I am so sorry I was not here sooner. I am so sorry I did not see what was happening. You are here now, he said. That is what matters. I heard a car in the driveway. My parents were home. I quickly put all the documents back in the drawer exactly as I had found them. I have to go. But Grandpa, do not take the medication if you can avoid it. I need you clear-headed. Can you keep pretending to be more confused than you are? I have been doing it for 2 weeks, he said with a small, sad smile. I can do it a little longer. I locked the door behind me and ran upstairs, putting the keys back in my parents' medicine cabinet, just as I heard the front door open. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I went to my room and splashed water on my face, trying to calm down, trying to look normal. For the rest of that day and night, I acted like everything was fine. I helped put away the groceries my mom had bought. I watched football with my dad. I made small talk about school and work, all while my mind was racing, planning, trying to figure out the best way to handle this. That night, I could not sleep again. I lay in my bed thinking about Grandpa locked in that room just below me, thinking about how long this had been going on, thinking about all the times I could have visited but did not, all the times I could have noticed something was wrong but was too distracted by my own life. I thought about whether I should confront my parents directly, but I decided against it. They would just deny everything, and then they would know I was onto them. They might hurt Grandpa to cover their tracks. They might destroy evidence. They might do something desperate. No, the police needed to be the first to know. The police needed to see Grandpa and that room and those documents before my parents had a chance to clean anything up. The next morning, Saturday, I told my parents I had to go back to school early. I said I had forgotten about a shift at work on Sunday that I could not miss. They seemed relieved, which told me everything. They wanted me gone. They wanted me away from Grandpa before I figured out what they were doing. Except I had already figured it out. I packed my bag, said goodbye, and drove away from the house. But I did not go back to school. I drove to the police station in the town where my parents lived. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, gathering my courage. This was it. The moment where I crossed a line I could never uncross. The moment where I turned in my own parents. But they were not my parents anymore. They were criminals who were abusing and stealing from a helpless old man. And that old man was my grandfather, the man who raised me, the man I loved more than anyone. So I got out of the car and walked into the police station. Inside, I told the officer at the front desk that I needed to report elder abuse. He looked at me seriously and asked me to wait. A few minutes later, a woman in her 40s came out. She introduced herself as Detective Sarah Martinez and led me to a small interview room. "Tell me what is going on," she said, sitting down across from me. And I told her everything. The locked door, the excessive medication, the weight loss, the bank statements, the stolen money, Grandpa's note, my visit to his room, the photos I had taken of all the documents. I talked for over an hour, showing her everything on my phone, explaining how my parents had been systematically abusing and exploiting my grandfather for years. Detective Martinez listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, her face was hard. "This is extremely serious," she said. "If what you are telling me is true, your parents are committing multiple felonies. Elder abuse, false imprisonment, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, possibly more." "It is all true," I said. "I saw it with my own eyes. I have photos of the documents. And Grandpa is lucid enough to testify if you can get him away from them." "We're going to need to do a welfare check immediately," she said. "And we will need to get adult protective services involved. This cannot wait. Every hour your grandfather spends in that situation is another hour of abuse." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I make some calls," she said. "And then we pay your parents a visit." I stayed at the police station while Detective Martinez coordinated with Adult Protective Services and got the necessary authorizations. It took about 3 hours. 3 hours where I sat in that small room drinking bad coffee and staring at the walls and trying not to think about what was going to happen. Finally, Detective Martinez came back. "We are ready," she said. "We have another officer, a social worker from APS, and a paramedic team on standby. We are going to your parents' house now to conduct a welfare check on your grandfather. Are you willing to come with us?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. We drove in a convoy, 2 police cars, an APS vehicle, and an ambulance. I rode with Detective Martinez. My hands were shaking. My stomach was churning. I kept thinking about what my parents would say when they saw the police, about how they would look at me when they realized what I had done. We pulled up to the house at just after 2 in the afternoon. My parents' cars were both in the driveway. Detective Martinez rang the doorbell. I stood slightly behind her, trying to breathe normally. My dad answered the door. He looked confused, then alarmed when he saw the police. His eyes found me, and I saw the exact moment when he realized I had betrayed them. His face went red, his eyes hard. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Marcus, what did you do?" "We are here to conduct a welfare check on Robert Sullivan," Detective Martinez said. "We have received a credible report of elder abuse and neglect. We need to see him immediately." My mom appeared behind Dad. When she saw the police, when she saw me, her face went white. "This is insane," she said. "Robert is fine. He is being well cared for. Marcus, how could you do this to us?" "How could I do this?" I said, and I could hear my voice shaking with anger. "How could you do what you have been doing to Grandpa? Locking him in a room? Drugging him? Stealing his money? Starving him? "We have done no such thing," Dad said, but his voice wavered. "Sir, we need to see Mr. Sullivan now," Detective Martinez said firmly. "You can either let us involuntarily, or we will get a warrant and come in anyway. Your choice." My father glared at her, then at me, then stepped aside. "Fine. He is in his room. But you are going to see that everything is fine, and you will apologize for this harassment." Detective Martinez, the other officer, and the APS social worker went straight to Grandpa's room. Mom unlocked it with shaking hands. I watched from the hallway as they opened the door and went inside. I could not see their faces, but I could see their body language. The way the social worker's shoulders tensed. The way Detective Martinez's hand went to her radio. The way the other officer shook his head. The social worker came out a minute later. Her face was pale. "We need that ambulance in here now," she said to the officer. "And I need to call my supervisor. This is one of the worst cases I have ever seen." The paramedics rushed in with a gurney. I could hear them talking to Grandpa, gentle voices, asking him questions, checking his vital signs. I moved closer to the door and saw him there in that hospital bed, looking so small and frail, and my heart broke all over again. They brought him out on the gurney a few minutes later. He was awake, looking around with clear, terrified eyes. When he saw me, he reached out his hand. I took it, walking alongside the gurney as they wheeled him toward the front door. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it. I told you I would," I said. At the front door, I had to let go. They loaded him into the ambulance. The social worker said they were taking him to the hospital for a full medical evaluation. She said I could come visit later that evening. Inside the house, Detective Martinez was taking photos of Grandpa's room, the hospital bed, the medication bottles, the bedpan, the locked door, all of it. The other officer was asking my parents questions, and they were both refusing to answer, both demanding their lawyer. Detective Martinez came out of the room and walked straight to my parents. "David Sullivan and Catherine Sullivan, you are both under arrest for elder abuse, false imprisonment, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as she read them their rights, watched as the other officer put handcuffs on them, watched as my mother started crying, saying it was all a misunderstanding, saying they had only been trying to help, watched as my father stared at me with pure hatred. "I hope you are happy," he said as they led him toward the door. "You just destroyed your own family." "No," I said. "You destroyed it when you started abusing Grandpa. I just made sure you faced consequences." They were taken away in the police cars. The house was suddenly quiet. Detective Martinez stayed behind to finish processing the scene. She told me I could go, that she had my statement and my contact information, that they would be in touch. I drove to the hospital. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours while they examined Grandpa. Finally, a doctor came out and told me I could see him. He was in a hospital bed in a private room, hooked up to IVs, looking exhausted but more alert than I had seen him in years. When I walked in, he smiled. "Hey, kid," he said. "Hey, Grandpa," I said, pulling a chair up next to his bed. We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "Thank you for believing me, for helping me, for being brave enough to do what needed to be done." "I should have done it sooner," I said. "I should have been paying attention. I should have noticed what was happening." "You are young," he said. "You had your own life. You are not responsible for your parents' choices. But Marcus, you saved my life. Do not ever doubt that." The doctor had told me that Grandpa was severely dehydrated and malnourished, that he had bed sores and muscle atrophy, that he had dangerous levels of several medications in his system, that another few months in those conditions, and he probably would not have survived. But he was going to be okay now. He was getting fluids and nutrients. They were weaning him off the unnecessary medications. They were starting physical therapy to rebuild his strength. He was going to recover. Over the next few days, the full extent of what my parents had done became clear. The police executed a search warrant on the house and found more evidence. Years of financial records showing systematic theft. Emails between my parents discussing how to hide money from Grandpa and from the authorities. A journal my mother had kept where she complained about having to take care of Grandpa and wished he would just die already. Adult Protective Services conducted a full investigation. They interviewed Grandpa extensively once he was off the medications and clear-headed. He told them everything about the isolation, the drugging, the neglect, the financial exploitation, about how he had been a prisoner in his own son's house for years. The case against my parents was overwhelming. They were charged with multiple felonies: elder abuse, false imprisonment, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, forgery. The district attorney said it was one of the most egregious cases of elder abuse he had seen in his career. My parents tried to fight it at first. They hired an expensive lawyer and claimed they had been providing appropriate care. They said Grandpa really did have severe dementia. They said the money they took was for his care. They said the lock on his door was for his safety. But the evidence was too strong. The medical records showed Grandpa did not have severe dementia, just some mild cognitive decline normal for his age. The financial records showed the money had gone to vacations and cars and jewelry, not medical care. The photos of his room showed conditions that no reasonable person would call appropriate. Eventually, they both pleaded guilty to avoid trial. Part of their plea deal required them to pay back everything they had stolen from Grandpa, plus interest and penalties. It came to over $500,000 when you factored in all the charges and fraudulent purchases. They also had to pay for Grandpa's new living arrangements and medical care. Adult Protective Services helped him get set up in a really nice assisted living community, not a nursing home, but actual independent living apartments for seniors. He had his own one-bedroom apartment with a kitchen and bathroom and living room. There were common areas where residents could socialize. There were activities and outings. There was a dining room with good food. There were staff available if he needed help, but he had his freedom and privacy. Most importantly, he had his dignity back. I visited him constantly, 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more. We would have dinner together in his apartment or in the community dining room. We would watch sports. We would play chess. We would just talk, really talk, for the first time in years. He told me stories about my grandmother who died before I was born, about his career, about his life. I told him about school, about my girlfriend, about my hopes for the future. It was like getting him back from the dead, the real him, not the drugged, confused shell my parents had turned him into. He was still older, still dealing with the effects of his stroke, still moving slower than he used to. But his mind was sharp. His sense of humor was back. His smile was genuine. 6 months after I reported my parents, they were sentenced. My father got 6 years in state prison. My mother got 5 years. They both looked defeated at sentencing, smaller somehow. They had lost everything. Their freedom, their reputation, their house, which had to be sold to pay restitution, their careers, each other, because Mom filed for divorce from prison. The judge asked me if I wanted to make a statement before sentencing. I stood up and looked at them. "You were supposed to take care of him," I said. "He was your father. He raised you. He loved you. And when he needed you most, when he was vulnerable and dependent, you saw an opportunity. You locked him in a room and drugged him and stole from him and waited for him to die so you could take what little he had left. You did not care that he was suffering. You did not care that he was lonely and scared. You only cared about money, and I will never forgive you for that." My mother tried to say something, to apologize or explain, but the judge told her to be quiet. Then he sentenced them both to the maximum allowed under the law. After the sentencing, I went to see Grandpa. I told him it was over, that justice had been done, that they would be in prison for years. He nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" he asked me. "I do not know," I admitted. "They are my parents. Part of me still loves them, or loves who they used to be, but they did something unforgivable, and I do not regret turning them in. I do not feel guilty. Is that wrong?" "No," he said firmly. "It is not wrong. They made choices. They hurt someone who could not defend himself, and you held them accountable. That took courage. That took strength. And I am proud of you. I just wish I had done it sooner." "You did it when you could," he said, "when you saw the truth and had the power to act on it. That is all anyone can do." Now, 3 months after their sentencing, my life has settled into a new normal. I am still in college, working toward my degree. I still have my job, but I also have my grandfather back in my life in a real, meaningful way. We are making up for lost time, creating new memories, building the relationship that should have continued all along but was stolen from us. Grandpa is doing well. He has gained back the weight he lost. His bed sores have healed. He has friends at his community. He goes on outings, plays cards, attends movie nights. He is living, really living, for the first time in 5 years. My parents write to me from prison sometimes. Long letters trying to explain what happened, trying to justify their actions, saying they were stressed about money, saying they made mistakes, saying they still love me, saying I ruined their lives by reporting them. I do not read the letters anymore. I throw them away unopened, because there is no explanation that makes what they did acceptable. There is no justification for treating an elderly parent the way they treated Grandpa, and I did not ruin their lives. They ruined their own lives by making terrible, cruel choices. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I wish I had handled it differently, if I feel guilty about my parents being in prison. The answer is no. I do not regret it. I do not feel guilty, because the truth is, if I had not acted when I did, my grandfather would probably be dead by now. My parents would have kept drugging him, kept starving him, kept neglecting him until his body just gave out, and they would have collected whatever money he had left and moved on with their lives like nothing had happened. They would have cried at his funeral, and no one would have known what they did. But I saw that napkin. 3 words in shaky handwriting. "Help me, Marcus." And I chose to believe my grandfather over my parents. I chose to investigate instead of accepting easy explanations. I chose to act instead of staying silent. And because I made those choices, my grandfather is alive and thriving. He is living in dignity, surrounded by people who respect him, spending his remaining years the way he wants to spend them, not locked in a dark room, not drugged into submission, not slowly dying while his children stole everything he worked his whole life to build. That Thanksgiving dinner changed everything. One moment of lucidity from Grandpa, one desperate plea for help, one napkin passed under a table. It could have been missed. I could have ignored it. I could have believed my parents when they said everything was fine, but I did not, because being an adult is not just about reaching a certain age. It is not about turning 18 or 21 or graduating college or getting a job. Being an adult is about making hard choices when they need to be made. It is about standing up for what is right even when it costs you something. It is about protecting the people who cannot protect themselves, even when those people are being hurt by your own family. I was 20 years old when I sent my parents to prison to save my grandfather. Some people think I am a hero. Some people think I am a terrible son who betrayed his family. I do not think I am either of those things. I think I am just someone who loved his grandfather enough to do the right thing, even when the right thing was hard, even when it meant turning against my own parents, even when it meant being called a traitor and a family destroyer. I did what needed to be done because no one else was going to do it, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, without hesitation, without regret, because Grandpa was worth saving, because he deserved to live with dignity, because what my parents were doing was wrong, and someone had to stop them. That someone turned out to be me, a 20-year-old college student who was just trying to understand why his grandfather passed him a note at Thanksgiving dinner. A kid who loved his grandpa enough to believe him when he said he needed help. I am not special. I am not brave. I am just someone who paid attention when it mattered. Someone who acted when action was needed. Someone who chose truth over comfort, justice over family loyalty. And if that makes me a bad son, then I guess I am a bad son. But I am a damn good grandson. Thank you for listening to my story of growing up faster than I ever wanted to. I have left 2 more stories on your screen, both from young men who learned that sometimes becoming an adult does not happen at 18. It happens the moment your family needs you to be strong. Click on whichever one speaks to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be forced to grow up overnight, that notification bell is waiting. Until tomorrow, remember, age is just a number, but courage defines who you really are.